explaining to me all of the reasons he thinks this game is mispriced and there is real value on New England.
Value?
And he said, no, to win. And he says, I jotted it down and then I checked with him if it was okay if I quoted him on this.
I love this guy.
He said, when you really look at it, the Patriots defense is the better defense in this game.
Oh.
He mentioned a stat that you've mentioned a few times. They didn't lose a game all year when they had Milton Williams and Christian Gonzalez. He talked about how he thought they had that second Bills game in hand and then got a little conservative. And I'm standing there looking at the man who I believe might be the sharpest sports bettor I know. And I'm like, sweet Christ, sorry. He sounds just like Wildes.
This is unbelievable. I can't wait to meet this guy.
And it really rattled me. Because I'm like, Wildes, who his analysis, it's kind of like, you know, what's the cartoon where the mom's voice is all wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Peanuts or whatever.
Yeah. It's the teacher.
The teacher. That's kind of what happens when, like, Wildes is like, no, here's the data. I don't really hear that. I hear, like, you know, bells and whistles.
Yeah. I'm like, it was snowing. I just keep on saying that.
But this person, I respect their opinion.
It's literally,
and
I've said that stuff.
They're saying the same things. So I paused, and then I asked myself, as much as I respect Nihar, is he sharper than me? Seattle's defense is better than New England. Seattle's coach annihilates young quarterbacks. Seattle has the only true superstar skill player in the game. Seattle's quarterback is playing the best of his life, while New England's quarterback is doing a Trent Dilfer impersonation thus far in the playoffs. Seattle played a gauntlet of a schedule. New England played the softest schedule in 25 years. Seattle 27, New England 17
that one hurts.
Is my official prediction.
All right, there we have his formal forecast for the game's outcome. Indeed, I had a suspicion Nick was engaged in a kind of slow play reveal, as there was simply no conceivable scenario where he would narrate that entire elaborate storyline only to culminate with, and that is precisely why I am selecting the Patriots. The logic wouldn't track. It felt like a deliberate narrative feint. Regarding the other analyst, Nighthawk, or whatever his identifier is, he forfeited all credibility with me the instant he posited that the Patriots' defensive unit is actually superior to that of the Seattle Seahawks. This, folks, is the quintessential example of why immersive game film study is non-negotiable. I emphasize this point perpetually, and it's something I almost hesitate to reiterate because I never want it to be misconstrued as condescension. That is never my intent. I genuinely envision these discussions as if we're all congregated in a casual circle, simply exchanging perspectives on the sport we love. It is never a dynamic where I perceive myself on some elevated platform, decreeing, "Allow me to illuminate the truth for you all." My analytical approach is fundamentally distinct. I have no involvement with, nor interest in, point spreads, seeking out perceived value in betting markets, or any related activity. That entire domain holds zero appeal for me. If that is your passion, by all means, engage with it. However, a substantial portion of the contemporary sports commentary landscape has become saturated with that very mindset. Consequently, I am continually exposed to that particular thought process, especially through figures like Nick, and even in dialogues involving Colin and others, who frequently anchor their conversations in those terms. Frankly, when the discourse shifts towards expected value, cover percentages, and similar metrics, my attention invariably dissipates. I find myself mentally disengaging because so much of that analysis is purely mathematical abstraction. It devolves into statements like, this team is actually plus 7.3 in adjusted run defense metrics, creating a negative expected value proposition on this specific line. My internal response is always, gentlemen, you are attributing a degree of intellectual sophistication to this that it simply does not possess. This is my perpetual contention. If sports outcomes were purely a function of straight mathematics, immutable statistics, and hard science, then you would witness the equivalent of Wall Street establishing a permanent outpost in Las Vegas. The world's most brilliant quantitative minds would converge, creating a massive, hyper-efficient industry that would, paradoxically, be unsustainable because the edge would be too easily arbitraged away. Therefore, when individuals insist on viewing the game through a purely analytical, data is absolute lens, it sounds compelling and provides a comforting sense of certainty. Obviously, if you could simply input data, execute a formula, and have 1 + 1 unfailingly equal 2, that would be fantastic. I would adore that clarity. If a reliable mechanical formula existed, we would all utilize it. But that is unequivocally not how professional football operates. It is not the reality. The most successful professional betting entities in existence operate with a win percentage hovering around 53%, marginally better than a coin flip. These are the elite practitioners. So when someone makes an assertion as detached from observable reality as claiming the Patriots' defense is superior, my immediate conclusion is that individual is not actually watching the contests with critical attention. If you are going to reference a data point like, well, they essentially had the Bills defeated but grew overly conservative, my retort is, what conceivable relevance does a regular season game strategy decision from months ago have to the Super Bowl? Seriously, it holds literally zero bearing. That is precisely the issue with sourcing data from Week 4, Week 10, or Week 12 and applying it as definitive proof for a championship game prediction. It becomes a meaningless exercise. Citing that Sam Darnold threw a specific number of interceptions in October is irrelevant. I find my own perspective on this game's potential unfolding to be in a state of constant fluctuation. I possess my core beliefs, and I have articulated them as vociferously and firmly as I possibly can. In fact, I have been more resolute in this Super Bowl analysis than in previous years. I have only produced dedicated video content for a few Super Bowls, the ones for the 23, 24, and now this 25 season, though we are technically in 26. I have never been inclined to issue ironclad, hyper-specific predictions because I fundamentally lack faith in their authenticity. I recall Nick referencing some prediction from 2017. I am inherently skeptical of such pronouncements. I perceive them as largely fabricated. It is a mechanism where, if you are correct, you can triumphantly proclaim, "See, I told you precisely how this would transpire." And if you are incorrect, you simply chuckle it off and pivot to the next topic. I consciously strive to avoid that paradigm. The strongest, most definitive proclamation I am willing to make, and I have reiterated it numerous times, is this. If the Seattle Seahawks perform at the apex of their capabilities, the game will not be closely contested. This does not necessarily prophesy a 42-3 blowout, but I am confident it would culminate in a victory secured by more than one scoring possession. The subsequent layer of that argument is that even if the New England Patriots execute their optimal brand of football, the final margin would still likely reside in that two-score territory. The only plausible avenue I discern for a Seahawks defeat is if they fail to perform at that peak level. The methodology for the Patriots to induce that underperformance, in my estimation, hinges on two primary mechanisms. Foremost is Drake May exploiting his mobility, not via deep passing strikes, not through spectacular throws to Stephon Diggs or other receivers, not even via ingenious play calling from Josh McDaniels. It is his legs. It is the demoralizing, back-breaking scramble where coverage is flawless, pressure arrives, and May eludes it to rip off a 25-yard gain. That is the moment you witness the defensive lineman with hands on hips, laboring for breath, and the broadcast commentator, I believe it's Collinsworth this year, exclaiming, "Oh man, what a soul-crushing play! Look at this Seahawks defense. Everyone was blanketed, and the sheer greatness of Drake May is on full display." That sequence is the catalyst for frustration, for forcing a proud unit onto its back foot, fostering desperation, and initiating a potential cascade of errors. The second mechanism is, of course, disrupting Sam Darnold. Relentlessly disrupting his rhythm, his timing, his comfort. The objective is to get that first domino to fall, to nurture a snowball effect that escalates into a full-blown avalanche. Those are the dual pathways I envision for the Patriots to compel Seattle away from their best performance. It is not merely about locking down specific receivers like Jackson Smith and Jigba or stifling the run game. The formula is more specific and more demanding. That encapsulates my overarching perspective on this matchup. As I have stated previously, Super Bowls possess an inherent element of unpredictability. I firmly believe every participant experiences fear and nervousness to some degree. Legends like Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes have admitted as much. Anyone claiming otherwise is engaging in nonsense. It is not a fear of failure per se, but rather the consequence of the moment being so profoundly heightened, so intensely magnified. Unless you have competed in an arena where the stakes felt existential, it can be challenging to fully grasp. But it is analogous to the most pressurized presentation, public speaking engagement, or consequential personal interaction imaginable. The emotional and psychological volume is cranked to its maximum setting. Under those conditions, events can become peculiar. This phenomenon has affected virtually every quarterback of the last decade in the Super Bowl. Broadcasts frequently acknowledge it, noting that a player or team just needs to settle down, or is a little too amped up. The unique challenge of the Super Bowl is that while you are supremely energized, the operational tempo of the event is paradoxically slower. Pre-game festivities are interminable, commercial breaks are extended, and the rhythm is fundamentally different from a regular season contest. Players who have experienced multiple Super Bowls often cite this as a disruptive factor they were unprepared for in their first appearance. You are brimming with adrenaline, yet forced to endure prolonged pauses. When you amalgamate all these factors, the immense pressure, the altered tempo, the sheer magnitude, genuinely anything becomes possible. That inherent volatility is what renders the event so captivating. My conviction, however, is that this specific Seahawks roster has already navigated numerous regular season instances where the volume was cranked up, mistakes proliferated, and adversity struck, be it in all three clashes with the Rams or against teams like the Buccaneers. They have confronted those moments of chaos and successfully overcome them. While the Patriots have demonstrated resilience, notably with Drake May overcoming fumbles in the playoffs, those instances often occurred while they maintained control of the game's flow. The Seahawks, conversely, have found themselves in contests where they were genuinely out of control and still engineered a path to victory. Therefore, in a scenario where the Super Bowl atmosphere amplifies every error and momentum swings wildly, I believe the Seahawks are simply more equipped, more poised to weather that storm. If you pose the hypothetical of which team could overcome a 14-point deficit to win the Lombardi Trophy, my unequivocal answer would be the Seahawks. It must be them. Conversely, I believe if the Seahawks establish a lead, the contest is effectively concluded. It would be a decisive wrap. They possess the capacity to initiate an avalanche or to methodically control the game in a manner reminiscent of their victory over the 49ers in the final week of the season, a game they commanded from start to finish, even if the final score appeared closer. They can adopt a smart, clock-controlling, defensively dominant approach to secure victory. That is the team that has arrived at this juncture. Nick mentioned that conversing with a particularly intelligent individual gives him pause and forces reconsideration. I find that interesting because my own psychological process is the inverse. Whenever I feel an intense surge of confidence in a particular take, my immediate instinctual reaction is to actively seek out reasons why I am incorrect. I deliberately interrogate my own assumptions, searching for flaws in my logic. I never desire to inhabit a space of unshakable certainty, proclaiming I know exactly what will happen. I consider that mindset fallacious. That is partially why I vocalize my reasoning so frequently. It serves as a reminder to myself to maintain intellectual humility. Thus, even as I elaborate on my confidence in the Seahawks internally, the moment I conclude a sentence, my mind is already countering, "No, that's wrong. You shouldn't have said that. Why did you articulate it that way? That was an overstatement. That likely will not prove accurate." It is a constant internal dialogue where I must consciously battle that self-imposed doubt. Because despite the internal critique, my fundamental assessment remains unchanged. Whether events will ultimately validate that assessment rests with the football deities and the unpredictable nature of the universe. But I do believe it represents the most accurate projection. I will subsequently create a dedicated Patriots video to delve into their perspective, but from my vantage point, their imperative is straightforward. They must render Sam Darnold profoundly uncomfortable from the opening whistle to the final gun. It cannot be intermittent. It must be a persistent state. Furthermore, Drake May's rushing ability is more critical than his role as a pure distributor or deep pass threat, a fixation of many analysts. The Patriots must force the Seahawks to contend with his mobility in a manner they would desperately prefer to avoid. Those are my synthesized reflections. I am immensely eager to hear your perspectives. What are your thoughts on the Seattle Seahawks? You have Nick selecting them. I'm uncertain how that makes you feel, given his record last year. You have Colin selecting them, also incorrect last year. The broader media sentiment seems aligned. We shall witness the outcome. This will officially be my final Seattle Seahawks video prior to the Super Bowl. It has been an extraordinary journey. Regardless of Sunday's result, I must express that it has been profoundly rewarding to produce this season's Seahawks content. There is a unique gratification in championing a team that does not command universal belief, in defending them against critiques for specific performances, arguing that the Week 1 game against the 49ers was actually competitive, or dissecting other nuanced moments. Engaging with the Seahawks fan community this season has been a genuine pleasure, a connection I had not deeply forged in prior years due to the team's different trajectory. It has been truly awesome. I regret that I will be unable to host a live stream during the game due to family commitments, but I fully intend to produce a post-game analysis video immediately following the conclusion of the Super Bowl. I sincerely wish to extend gratitude to all Seahawks fans, and indeed to everyone who engages with this content, though I presume this particular video will resonate strongly with the Seattle faithful. I am tremendously anticipating this championship contest. Thank you for participating in this analytical journey. I read every single comment submitted. Whether you find yourself in agreement or vehement disagreement with my positions, let's engage in discussion. Let's debate vigorously, but ultimately, let's share in the enjoyment of this spectacle. Please consider subscribing to the channel. We are cultivating a remarkable community here, and I would be delighted for you to be part of it. My aspiration is to build a space where we all feel a genuine connection, a shared excitement about the sport. I believe we are making significant progress toward that objective. Also, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, as it substantially assists with visibility and distribution within the platform's algorithmic framework. Thank you so much for your time and engagement.